So the third topic I'd like to talk about, the third HCI challenge for location-based services and experiences, is designing for the real world. How can you treat the real world beyond the software as if it was part of your design? In order to think about how we design for the real world, we're going to draw on a number of case studies, and in particular several case studies from the artist group Blast Theory. In fact, we'll meet them at several times throughout the course. Blast Theory are professional creatives who've been working in the field of locative media for over 20 years. They've won numerous awards, they've made games and installations and locative experiences that have toured the world. They've often worked closely with our team at the university, so we know their work very well. And during that time, we've come to understand very well how they think about designing locative experiences. And so in what follows, we're going to look at several of their unusual, often provocative examples, and to see what inspiration or lessons we can take from them, if you like, as the more everyday designers that we are. So let's look at the case study of Ulrika and Eamon Compliant. This is a work by Blast Theory. It's a locative experience that leads players on a journey through a city. As you explore the city, you're guided by a series of voice calls, by a series of telephone calls, and those both give you instructions but also deliver a story to you. The story is quite provocative. The theme of this work is terrorism, and at the beginning of the experience you are asked to choose to follow one of two characters, either Ulrika Meinhof or Eamon Collins, two terrorists from the 1970s. And as your walk unfolds, so does their story, and the game increasingly talks to you in an odd way, as if you perhaps almost were those people. You're then led to an encounter with a live actor, and from there you're led to a specially constructed set, an interview or even an interrogation room, where you have a one-to-one interview about your thoughts and questions about what would you fight for. As you leave the interview room, you get to look back through a little window, a one-way mirror, at the next person who's being interviewed. Technically, Ulrika and Eamon Compliant is quite lightweight. It doesn't use automated location triggers. It doesn't use lots of kind of augmented reality or other things. It relies on a series of phone calls, and the tracking is done by humans. There are members of the team watching the players as they go through the city, and at certain points they then call them up. We call this a Wizard of Oz design technique. I don't know if you've seen the film The Wizard of Oz, but if you remember it, there's a sort of giant technical facade in the film that is the wizard, but actually behind the scenes, hidden away, is a human who's sort of pretending to do that. And in a way, that's what Blast Theory are doing here. They're behind the scenes watching you, acting as if they were the computer. But we can learn a great deal from how they do that, and in particular from the instructions that they give you.
Hello, it's me. You and I are going on a walk together.
Hello.
Outside, it's 1973.
I'd like to be Eamon.
Hello, Eamon. I'll stay on the line while you walk. Keep your eyes open. Act natural. There's always a first time for this kind of thing, and practice makes it easier. I'm going to count to 10. If you're still on the line when I get to 10, then I'll know where you stand. 1. The two killers ride into Warren Point on a motorbike. 2. They switch the engine off, allowing the bike to glide the last 20 meters so as not to raise the alarm. 3. Once inside, Iceman goes down the corridor into Toombs' office. 4. He takes up a firing position with arms outstretched. 5. His gun jams, giving Toombs enough time to reach for his own weapon. 6. Iceman leaps onto him and the two men struggle. 7. The second gunman comes running down the hall and shouts, "Stand back." 8. Iceman lets go and the second man fires several shots into Toombs. 9. Iceman clears his weapon. 10. He pumps several more rounds into Toombs as he lies dying. 'Don't be shy. It's a question we all have to answer from time to time. And today, it's your turn. What can you do for the people around you? Now, get moving. Stand up and walk away from the bench. Do not look back. As you stand at the water's edge, you need to make a very important choice. If you want to quit, hang up right now. Eamon, you've made your choice.
What would you fight for?
Could you imagine a situation where your community was being attacked? People coming into your community and killing neighbours, friends at random. Could you imagine a situation then where you might fight? Yes.
So, Ulrika and Eamon compliant is certainly an unusual experience, and as I said before, it's technically in many ways a lightweight one. But the key thing that's done so well in it is the use of instructions to guide the participant, the player, through both the kind of digital narrative and a real city at the same time. I refer to this as being a thin layer of instructions. There isn't a huge amount of multimedia content here. You're not looking at huge amounts of video as you walk along or even listening to continuous audio. It's quite a thin connection digitally, but it's very carefully designed to keep your focus on the real world. In the video we saw there in Venice, which of course is a city rich with atmosphere and things to look at already. This is very much a deliberate tactic. The authoring of the instructions is also very carefully thought out. Blast Theory come from a theatrical background where they're used to scripting every moment of experience that somebody has. And you'll find a paper on the Moodle where we talk about how they design the instructions in detail. But to summarise it here, the instructions in Blast Theory's work do several things, and these are things you might want to think about bringing into your own designs. They tell people where to go. In order to do a locative experience, the participant has to know where they're heading, what to look for, when to stop. They tell people where to stand to get the ideal experience and where to look in which direction. They might say stand on the bridge and look down the river. They tell people how to behave, sit down, stand up, walk along, act natural like no one's watching you. They set the mood and the tone. That instruction to act natural, for example, if anything, what it does is convey to you a sense of being watched, of surveillance, and of being part of this conspiratorial game. When in this work they repeatedly ask you if you want to stop and go back, I don't think they really mean it, but it's a way of kind of upping the tension and the ante in the experience. I'll conclude by saying that in interactive experiences, it's instructions that are the new content. Perhaps you don't need huge amounts of digital media to bring a fantastic location to life. What you need to do is tell people how to act within it. Let's look at another case study, also from blast theory, and also that's fundamentally about a thin layer of carefully thought out instructions that bring the real world to life. But this is different because it's a much more mainstream experience, and it takes us directly back to the world of museums and of heritage. It's called Gift, and it actually builds on an idea that came up in Leslie Fosh's PhD. We met Leslie before in the sculpture garden example. And the idea here is that visitors to museums create little tours for each other as gifts. So I go to the museum, I visit, I think of someone, you, who I want to make a gift for. I search the museum for objects that I think would mean something to you, that you might like or that have a personal resonance. I take photos of them. I record some voice messages that explain why I've chosen them for you. And then the app, it's a web app, wraps that up as a little experience and sends you a link. As the receiver, you then might go to the museum, search out the items, listen to my messages and record a response. Or you might even appreciate my gift outside of the museum from home as if it was a kind of postcard. It's a simple but we think powerful experience, and it's all about instructions. You can try it out for yourself at demo.thegift.app, but we've also got a video for you.
The gifts.
Take these. Explain what it's all about.
Right. Thanks very much.
Okay, no worries.
Put them around your neck for now. I'll just explain a couple of things.
You're going to make a gift for someone special. They might be next to you right now. They might be on the other side of the world. You can tell a present that somebody has thought about compared to one where they panicked or didn't bother. Right, it's time to get out there. Let that person be your filter as you walk. Ignore the things you know they're not going to care about. Go and learn more about the objects you know nothing about. Keep walking as you start to browse slowly. The first thing you choose, why is it right for this person? Is it going to trigger a memory of the time you've spent together? Does it shine out in their favourite colour? You've got a moment to record a note about this object. What was the thought, and why does it count? When you're ready, hit record.
She looks like mysterious, and I think she does look like she could do with a friend. I think maybe you could be a nice friend for her.
Hey, nice one. If you know where you're going next, then just start walking. If you don't, wander with your eyes wide open. Now it's time to finish this off. Beginning, done. Middle, done. You need an ending. The object this person is going to be left standing in front of when your voice is gone. Something they wouldn't get for themselves. You've got a pretty big building full of millions of stories. It's not too late to surprise them. Is there a thought you want to leave them with?
So Abby, I know you like dogs. This one looks a bit like Greta.
Here's a twist for you. The last thing you're going to add to your gift isn't an object in the museum. It's a song. You're choosing the soundtrack to the end of this person's journey as they walk back to where they started. Hey. So, you're the one getting the gift. Lucky. Someone who knows you has visited the museum. They searched out things they thought you would care about, and they took photos and made messages.
So you need to find this one by going upstairs. You go to the back of the main gallery and up the step. Of the first room you'll find, she's a little girl and she looks a bit sad, but she's very beautiful. All the other paintings are really nice and big, bright, but this little girl looks a bit like she could do with a friend. I think maybe you could be a nice friend for her. Check her out. So here we are, Abby. There's a drawing for you. Alexander Calder's cow hand lassoing a steer. As an illustrator, I think we'll like it. As a lover of horses, I know you're going to like it. And as a champion of cowboys, I think you're going to love it. So Abby, this dog, he looks a bit sad, but if you look at the whole thing, it's quite happy. I know you like dogs.
Hey Dan, I'm at the museum and I've just opened my gift. Thanks for the recommendation. I'm definitely going to check out more drawings by Alexander Calder.
Here we are, on the other side. I wonder, did they surprise you? Or do you know each other so well that surprises are kind of impossible? There was one more thing that they wanted to give you. It's a song. I guess if you know them well, you might work out why they chose it for you. Maybe one day you'll return the favour?
Another aspect of the real world that you need to design for, or you can include as a feature in your designs, is, of course, the weather. The weather is a very dynamic, experienced, visceral part of the real world, and it makes a huge difference to the experience that anyone who's outdoors. So you need to think about what's the weather likely to be like in your experience, and how would that affect the players, the locations, and the devices. It's of course tempting to think about bad weather, rain, snow, wind, ice, that could cause hazards, could interfere with equipment, could make some locations completely inaccessible. Depending where you are in the world, there may be seasonal variations. There may be a wet season, a rainy season and a dry season, or there may be, as in the UK, the kind of 4 seasons we have throughout the year. Might you design different content for each of the seasons? In the winter, might you take people to different places or perhaps bring them indoors? So you'd have different versions of your game. Good weather can be a problem too. Sunlight can notoriously make some screens difficult to read. But then you can make weather a feature of your game. If we go back to the Yorkshire Sculpture Park example from before, people who did the experience fed back, or some people fed back, that actually having the music around you, even on a January day when Adrian was doing his tests, somehow felt warm and comforting, and it kind of felt good to be outside. So whether you see it as a problem to be solved, or actually a part of the experience that brings life to what people are doing, the weather is a key part of the real world that you need to take account of. Our next case study is called Rider Spoke. It's another blast theory work, another locative experience, but it has one big difference. Up to now, the experiences we've looked at have been pedestrian. I don't mean in the sense of being boring, but in the sense of people are largely walking around an environment. Rider Spoke, on the other hand, is deliberately designed for vehicles, and in this case, and in particular, for cycles and cyclists. In Rider Spoke, you come to a location, you're given a bicycle, you're given a device. It's actually a kind of Nokia handheld device. This is a pre-smartphone piece of work. But don't be fooled, the design principles that they came up with are just as valid to smartphones as they were to Nokia devices. Anyway, you're given a bike and a device, and you're encouraged to cycle around a city for about an hour, often at night, on your own. And as you gently cycle, you're encouraged to stop occasionally and find stories that other people have recorded and listen to them, and then eventually to find a quiet spot and to record and leave behind your own story. So over several weeks of play, user-generated content, user-generated stories gradually builds up. The beauty of the work is the way that it's very carefully designed for cyclists, how cycling changes your physical state and also your experience of the city. You can only go to certain places, but you can travel a very long way in an hour. And once again, how the instructions are designed to elicit these stories.
And it turned into quite a scary, raucous affair. People were coming at the house from all angles with baseball bats, and we had to barricade ourselves in a bedroom, put the wardrobe against the door, and people were jumping out of windows and running for safety.
We would like you to cycle through the city making recordings and eavesdropping on recordings made by other people. To do that, you're going to be using one of these. You're going to have an earpiece and a microphone.
This is one of those moments when you're on your own. You might feel a little odd at first, a bit self-conscious or a bit awkward. But you're alright, and it's okay. Relax, and find somewhere that you like. It might be a particular building or a road junction. When you have found somewhere you like, give yourself a name and describe yourself.
So I'm standing at Oxford Circus.
Not too far from Clerkenwell Green.
I'm hiding by an old church on Helmet Row.
I'm at the junction of Cheapside and Wood Street, somewhere behind St Bartholomew's Hospital.
I found a building that's probably the shortest building in the area.
Hi, I'm 27.
Yo, this is Quincy.
My name today is AJ. My name is Ascendance. I am grey, stark, and colonial.
My name's James.
I'm Ella, and I'm 41, and I'm afraid.
Anyhow, so I was sitting in the hot tub with the aunt on one side singing Sound of Music songs and the beautiful 21-year-old twin on the other, so it was a bit of snoggage. Beautiful young Claudia ended up taking her top off and her aunt told me to suck her nipples. What could I do? You know, I was just a guest at this family Christmas.
Please will you cycle back towards a busier place and look for someone who catches your eye. Just watch them and follow them.
I didn't get to see her face, but she has led me to Angel, which is where I used to live. I used to live with a girl called Caroline, my ex-girlfriend. So why not call the girl in the hood? That was her distinguishing feature. Anyway, let's call her Caroline.
His hands always felt like paper. Paper sounds like a negative thing, but it's not. He has the softest hands, but there's something dry about them that's so beautiful. I feel like I can feel the creases. And there's a comfort, and when I hold his hand, I feel held and just so many things I want, but don't feel like I have right now at this moment. And yeah, that's it.
You've been riding for a while now. I have one last thing to ask you. Will you make me a promise? It might be small, a promise about tomorrow, or a friend. It might be something more profound. But now, tonight, say your promise out loud into the air.
Even though it's almost impossible, I really am going to try my best not to be afraid. Because I've been afraid so much. And to make some choices, if for no other reason than in honor of the people who can't make choices at all anymore. For Hope and Danny and Marcus and Mary, Louis and Martha, and Liz Oberstein, and especially Ben, who got to make so few at all.
So a few words then to say about vehicles as a mode of travel through the experience. Rather than just thinking about things that take place on foot, you might deliberately choose to use vehicles within an experience or design an experience that's chosen for particular vehicles. Vehicles will affect how far people can travel, from a few city blocks on foot to many miles. They constrain where you can go. If you're in a car, you have to stay on the roads. I think they change your engagement or experience of the terrain and the weather. Cycling uphill and cycling into the wind are hard work, and you noticed hills and wind in a very different way to when you're walking. So you can design a game where the content is different when you're cycling up a hill from when you're cycling down it. The effects of physical exertion, a little bit of exercise and kind of gentle exercise may make you feel kind of very open to things. Equally, being panting and out of breath might change the way you perceive or experience any digital media. And finally, you can design experiences for repeated journeys. Think about commutes to and from work, or bus or tram journeys where you go up and down the same lines. Does the content vary? Could you make collecting games where you collect things at one stop, drop them off at another, and then do different things on the repeat journey? So, ensuring the safety of participants becomes particularly important in locative experiences because they engage people with the uncontrolled real world. So you need to think about accidents, people's personal safety, crossing roads, bumping into people, and you need to think about how this affects both the direct participants in your experience, the people who are doing it, but also potentially bystanders. Who else might be around? Who might they be? Do they understand what's happening? Are they at risk from collisions or other things that might happen? You need to think about what the risks are, so you need to anticipate them, but that's not enough. You also need to mitigate them. What can you do about risks? Well, firstly, you can generally choose your locations and routes carefully, so avoid dangerous places, rule them out of the game. You can avoid eyes-down experiences. Do people have to be looking at the screen all of the time? Are they phone zombies, as the card we're referencing here would have it? Or do you make an experience where people only engage at a safe moment? Most of the time they're walking along attending to the world, and then every now and then, a bit like in Leslie's sculpture garden, they put some headphones on or do something. Or in Rider Spoke, where people would cycle, then come to a stop before they engaged with the digital part of the experience. Can you back off at safety critical moments? We saw earlier Adrian's Yorkshire Sculpture Park audio track. He also made some audio walks for cities. And one thing he did was whenever you approached a busy road or junction, he would pull the audio level right down so you could still hear the traffic that's around you. And of course, alongside these things, you need to give clear guidance and warnings, tell people there are risks and so forth. But I would argue it's not enough to do that and just get them to tick a consent box. The other points you also need to take into account. Ultimately, it's your responsibility as an experienced designer. And there are some other risks too beyond safety. Does the experience disrupt other people? It may be safe, but it could still be annoying, and it could disrespect the environments in which it happens. There was quite a lot of controversy with Pokemon Go when it took place in cemeteries, for example, which caused a great deal of upset to people. Might it lead to overcrowding? Could you be a victim of your own success? Imagine you design a game for Nottingham city centre Market Square and it goes viral and hundreds of thousands of people turn up at once. Then the consequences to public order and overcrowding would be quite significant. So how do you spread out the action? What about other bystanders? Are they invited to watch or participate? Do they know what's going on? Do they understand that it's a game? Or might they take the action seriously? If you do make a game about terrorism or robbing a bank or something like this, which certainly has been done before, might some people believe it's real? There are some other issues about designing for public space too that aren't so much ethical, but are still interesting to consider when you're designing for the real world. Do you ask players to dress up, put on accessories or wear costumes? Do you make use of large screens? There are large urban screens in some city centres that you'll find. Can they be part of the game? And lastly, do you involve actors, as we saw in Ulrika and Eamon Compliant? Are they dotted around the landscape, also willing to get involved with people? Certainly human actors can be an extremely powerful part of an experience if you have a one-to-one encounter with someone.